Okay, so in this episode, we are doing the architecture of the nation, 4 blueprints for understanding state power and modern identity. So, the puzzle sits at the foundation of the modern world. Millions of people will never meet, who don't know each other, yet they cooperate. They pay taxes, they sacrifice, they die for a symbol they've never touched. How? So this is the question that explains everything, and the answer isn't complicated, it's just hidden. So the modern nation state is an engineering problem. You have a territory of millions of separate human beings, you have no central meeting place, you have no shared neighborhood. Most of them will never speak to each other, yet somehow they feel bound together. They share an identity. They believe in the same invisible abstractions. That is not natural. It is built. And to understand how power actually works, you need to see its architecture. There are 4 blueprints for the system. We're going to examine each layer by layer, but by then you'll see how the entire structure holds. So, layer 1, the foundations of power. Right? So, every structure requires a foundation. Max Weber identified it perfectly. The state is the human community that successfully claims the monopoly of the legitimate use of physical force within a territory. This is not an opinion. This is a definition. This is structural fact. So, 3 elements. 1, authority. The right to command and be obeyed, not through persuasion, through law. All right? And then 2, bureaucracy. The administrative machinery that executes this will consistently and personally, predictably. Bureaucrat doesn't care who you are. The rules apply the same way, every time. This is more powerful than it seems because predictability creates trust. And 3, enforcement. The capacity to compel compliance and punish dissent. Not everyone follows the law because they believe in it. Many follow it because the cost of breaking it is higher than the benefit. Jails, fines, loss of property, loss of freedom. This is crude. This is mechanical, but it is foundational. Here's what Weber gives us: the institutional hardware of the nation, a monopoly on force, authority, bureaucracy, enforcement. But here is what he does not give us: why people care, why they feel connected to each other, why they sacrifice. Weber tells us what the nation is, not who the nation consists of. And that brings us to layer 2. A state can control a territory with force, but a nation needs something else: shared consciousness. This is where Benedict Anderson enters. He asks a simple question: what makes millions of strangers feel like they belong to the same group? His answer: an imagined community. Not fake, not fabricated, imagined. They are imagined because members will never know most of their fellow members. You will never meet them. You will never speak to them. Yet, in your mind lives an image of their communion. You see them, you feel part of them. Anderson traced this back to specific technology, the printing press. Before print, information moved slowly, differently across regions. A story in the north became a story in the south by the time it arrived. But print changed it. Suddenly, you had thousands of people that read the same newspaper on the same day, see the same images, learn from the same information at the same moment. This created a unified field of communication. Print capitalism, the mass production of books and newspapers, in a common vernacular, created for the first time the possibility of a shared mental world. This is profound because media doesn't just inform, it constructs reality. When 1,000 people read the same story, they unconsciously become a community. They feel part of something larger than themselves. They imagine themselves as part of a nation. In your time, this mechanism was not disappeared, it was accelerated. Social media, news feeds, viral moments, they all share through the same logic. A piece of information spreads, millions consume it. They feel part of a conversation, part of a collective moment. The technology change, the mechanism remains. It's important distinction. So Anderson shows us the second layer, cognitive blueprint of the nation, the shared consciousness that makes the institution possible. Weber gave us the foundation, force, and bureaucracy. Anderson gives us the glue, shared media, creating identity. But here's the problem. Shared idea is still an idea. For a nation to actually exist, that idea must be installed across a scattered, diverse population. It must be made real. It must be lived. Eugene Weber studied France in the 19th century. He asked, how did France become a nation? His mind was uncomfortable. It was built deliberately. Was it engineered? Nations are not born, nations are built. The French state didn't wait for French identity to emerge naturally. The state imposed it. First mechanism, schools. The states standardized education, a common curriculum, a common language, a common history. Before this, many French people didn't speak French. They spoke regional languages. Occitan, Breton, Basque. Each region had its own story, its own identity. The schools erased that. Children learned Parisian French. Right? They learned French history. They learned to think of themselves as French. This wasn't about education quality. It was about cultural replacement. Second mechanism, railroads. Railroads connected isolated regions. For the first time, people could move between areas. Goods could be traded, ideas could travel. But more than that, railroads were built to project state power. They moved soldiers, they moved administrators, they enforced the center's reach into periphery. You cannot have a nation without physical connection, without the ability to move goods, people, and soldiers efficiently. And that leads us to a third mechanism, conscription. The state enforced young men from every region into the military. They served together, they fought together, they died together. This is the most powerful layer of nation building because it's not abstract, it's lived experience. You grew up in a small village, you never left, you never met anyone from the next region. Then the state conscripts you, puts you on a train, trains you alongside men from everywhere else, forces you through danger alongside them. Now you have a shared symbol identity. Now you feel part of something larger. Eugene Weber shows us the third layer. The deliberate infrastructure of unification. Schools, railroads, conscriptions, all designed to break down local loyalty and build national identity. This is the engineering layer, a moment when shared consciousness becomes lived reality. But here's the danger in Weber's model. It assumes a blank slate. It assumes you can impose identity on people with no pre-existing ties, no shared culture, no common tradition. What if the state is trying to build on sand? What if the most powerful bonds are not manufactured, but inherited? YORAM HAZONY asked a different question. Why do some nations hold together while others collapse? His answer, shared culture. Not manufactured culture, not state-imposed identity, deep cultural heritage. Language spoken for centuries, traditions passed down, religion, mythology, shared history. Shared culture is tribe-like bond. It creates trust that no bureaucracy can manufacture. When you share a language with someone, you don't just share words, you share how the world is understood. You share the concepts that don't exist in other languages. You share the ways of thinking. Religion creates the same binding. Shared theology, shared rituals, shared understanding of what is sacrifice and what is profane. And history, shared trauma, shared victory, shared memory of our ancestors, creates a deep and almost biological sense of kinship. This is why nationalism is so powerful. Nationalism is the collective desire of people to govern themselves and preserve their unique cultural traditions. It's not artificial, it's not propaganda. It's a recognition of something real, a shared inheritance that is distinct and worth protecting. And because of this shared culture, you get cohesion, not just compliance, actual willingness to sacrifice, to sustain institutions, to maintain order. State with force but no shared culture must constantly suppress dissent. A state with shared culture can rule with legitimacy. The people want to follow the rules because the rules align with their understanding of how the world should be. Here is what HAZONY shows. The foundation, not just institutional power, it's cultural inheritance. The mortar between the bricks. This is where the architecture becomes truly elegant. Because these four layers don't exist separately, they reinforce each other continuously. Look, look at the system as a whole. You have a foundation, a state with the monopoly on force, authority, bureaucracy, enforcement. You have the atmosphere, an imagined community created through shared media and communication. You have the infrastructure, schools, railroads, military conscription, the mechanisms that make the imagined community lived reality. You have the mortar, shared cultural inheritance that binds the whole structure together. These are not separate, they feed each other. Watch the mechanism. The state uses its schools to teach a common history. The schools, controlled by the center, disseminate narratives that fuel Anderson's imagined community. Children read the same stories. They imagine the same nation. Those narratives pass through state institutions, active pre-existing cultural loyalties. HAZONY's shared culture becomes visible again, becomes activated. Shared media, newspapers, broadcasts, now social networks, spreads these narratives even further. And as the shared culture becomes stronger, it legitimizes the state's monopoly on force. Weber's coercion becomes unnecessary. The people believe in the state. The state no longer rules through force alone, it rules through legitimacy. This is the hidden structure of the modern nation. It is not simply an institution, it is not simply an idea, it is not simply infrastructure. It is all of them working together. Dynamic system where power, ideas, infrastructure, and culture are in a constant dialogue. Break one layer and the others still hold. But damage multiple layers simultaneously and the entire structure becomes fragile. This framework is not historical. It is alive now in your country, in your region, in your community. In the age of digital media, new imagined communities are forming. They're not bound by nation states. They cross borders. A person in Seoul feels part of the global gaming community. A person in Istanbul feels connected to a global religious movement. These are imagined communities in Anderson's sense, but they don't map onto the nation state. Question. Are these national, transnational communities destabilizing the nation state? Or are they creating new forms of loyalty that the state must now compete with? Which layer of the architecture is most under pressure? some argue state authority is under pressure. Globalization undermines the state's ability to enforce its will. Corporations move across borders. Information flows freely. Taxation becomes harder to collect. Others argue cultural cohesion is under pressure. Immigration creates diversity. Traditional narratives weaken. Regional identities resurface. People no longer share a common culture. Still, others argue the shared media layer is fractured. We no longer read the same newspapers, we curate our own information. We live in different media ecosystems or platforms. The imagined community together is fragmenting and splintering. So can cultural state successfully build HAZONY's cultural mortar? Or does it require a shared ethnicity, religion, historical narrative, traditions? Can the bonds be purely civic, based on law and shared media, rather than culture? This is not a question of opinion, this is a question of power mechanics. These are not academic debates. They are questions about whether your nation state survives intact or fractures under pressure. The nation state is not the final way to organize human beings. History shows many alternatives: empires, city-states, tribal confederations, bureaucracies, corporations. But right now, 2025, the nation state remains the primary organizing principle of the modern world. And its power is not accidental, it is not simple. It comes from a complex architecture. Max Weber's foundation, a state with a monopoly on legitimate force. Benedict Anderson's blueprint, an imagined community forged through shared media. Eugene Weber's infrastructure, schools, railroads, conscription, the mechanisms of unification. YORAM HAZONY's MORTAR, the pre-existing cultural bonds that legitimizes the entire system. Understanding these four layers is essential to understanding your world, not as it appears, but as it actually functions. When something breaks, when a nation fractures, when a state collapses, when a people lose faith in their institutions, it is because one of these layers has failed. And understanding why requires seeing the structure, not the headlines, not the personalities, the architecture. See the structure behind the story. You've watched System Power, and you now understand the architecture of the nation. Like to help others see the machinery. Thanks for watching.